Hello, esteemed viewers. Welcome back to Faith Meets Politics. Tune in because today we are going to get into something deep. America faces a crisis of crime and moral decay, and it's time we take a decisive action to restore order and justice in our nation. Today, I want to talk about why every state in America, and I mean every state, should have and enforce the death penalty, and why this punishment should be applied swiftly, publicly, and to specific crimes that have the most devastating effects on our society. First, let's talk about why the death penalty is a necessary deterrent. In recent years, we've seen crime rates skyrocket in many parts of the country, especially New York. Serial killers, child predators, and hardcore drug dealers are terrorizing, and I mean terrorizing, our communities, and the consequences are catastrophic. They are catastrophic consequences. Families are torn apart, neighborhoods are destroyed, and our sense of security is eroded. These crimes aren't just violations of the law, they're violations of humanity itself. That's right, they are violations of humanity. Justice demands that the punishment fit the crime. When someone takes a life, especially in a premeditated or heinous manner, they forfeit their right to live. When someone destroys countless lives by selling dangerous drugs like fentanyl or methamphetamine, they too are culpable for the for deaths and misery they cause. A lot of death comes from this. And when someone harms the most vulnerable among us, our children, through acts of abuse or exploitation, they demonstrate a level of depravity that cannot be tolerated. We cannot tolerate these types of crimes. Some people argue that the death penalty is too extreme or that it isn't, let's say, an effective deterrent. But let's look at history. Public executions were once a common practice, and while they may seem harsh by today's standards, they served a clear purpose. What was that purpose? To show society the severe consequences of heinous crimes. People back then feared the repercussions of their actions, and this fear helped to maintain order. Today, our justice system is too soft. Criminals know they can manipulate the system, dragging out appeals for decades and escaping true accountability. This lack of swift justice emboldens them to continue their crimes, knowing that the consequences will be delayed, if they come at all. Even, sometimes they're not even punished. Here's the problem with the current system. It's slow, expensive, and ineffective. On average, it takes 20 years for a death row inmate to be executed in the United States. During that time, the victims' families are forced to relive their trauma over and over again through endless appeals and legal battles. This isn't justice, brothers and sisters. It's cruelty. To fix this, we need a streamlined process for capital punishment, from arrest to execution. The entire process, and you're going to think this is probably a little radical, but the entire process, in my opinion, should take no more than 1 year. This would require significant reforms to the legal system, including limits of appeals and a focus on efficiency. We must balance the need for thoroughness with the need for timely justice. By doing so, we can ensure that the guilty are held accountable while minimizing the suffering of victims and their families. Additionally, executions should be public. I know what you're thinking, this is an extreme, but why? Because the purpose of punishment is not just to hold the criminal accountable, but to send a message to society. When executions are hidden away behind closed doors, their deterrent effect is diminished. But when they are public, they become a powerful symbol of justice. They show that our society takes crime seriously and that there are real consequences for breaking the law. Now, let's talk about drug dealers. The opioid epidemic has killed hundreds, beloved, hundreds of thousands of Americans. And the problem shows no sign of slowing down. It's not getting any better. It's getting worse. Hardcore drug dealers are profiting from this misery, knowing full well that their products are destroying lives, ripping families apart and destroying lives. They are no better than serial killers, and they should be treated as such. By applying the death penalty to those who traffic in deadly drugs, we can send a clear message. If you profit from the suffering and death of others, you will face the ultimate punishment. Listen, they're doing it in other countries, and you don't see so much drugs out there. Now, what about those who argue that death penalty is inhumane? I would ask, what is humane about allowing serial killers, child predators, and drug dealers to continue their reign of terror? What is humane about leaving victims' families without closure or justice? True humanity lies in protecting the innocent and ensuring that evil is met with the strongest possible response. Opponents of the death penalty also argue that it is prone to errors and that innocent people could be executed. This is a valid concern, okay? And it's why any death penalty system must have robust safeguards to ensure that only the guilty, only the guilty, are punished. Advances in forensic science, DNA testing, and improved investigation techniques make it possible to achieve a high degree of certainty in capital cases. Now, mistakes should be rare, and when they occur, they must be addressed immediately. But the possibility of error should not be an excuse to abolish the death penalty entirely. Instead, it should motivate us to create a system that is both fair and effective. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. By enforcing the death penalty swiftly and publicly, we send a message that crime will not be tolerated. We create a culture of accountability where people think twice before committing acts of violence or exploitation. This isn't about vengeance. It's about justice and deterrence. When criminals see that society is serious about punishment, they are less likely to commit crimes in the first place. People will think twice. Now, some may say this approach is too harsh or that it reflects a lack of compassion. But true compassion is about protecting the innocent and ensuring that justice is served. It's about valuing the lives of victims and their families over the rights of those who choose to commit heinous acts. Compassion for criminals must never outweigh our responsibility to protect society as a whole. I mean, these criminals, they don't have compassion on your family. They don't have compassion on nobody. Now, in conclusion, the death penalty is not just a tool for justice. It's a moral imperative. By applying it to the worst crimes, murder, child abuse, and drug trafficking, we can restore order to our communities, deter future crimes, and provide closure to victims' families. By making the process swift and public, we can ensure that justice is served efficiently and effectively. America needs bold action to address the crisis of crime. And the death penalty is a critical part of the solution. It's time for us to stand up for justice, protect the innocent, and send a clear message to the criminals. If you choose to destroy lives, you will face the ultimate consequence. The death penalty is a topic that often sparks a lot of debate. I'm going to get into the Christian part of it as a Christian. However, Now, the Bible clearly outlines that God has given those in authority the right to administer justice, including capital punishment. That's right, you heard it right, including capital punishment. It is biblical. In Genesis 9:6, God establishes a foundational principle. Whoever sheds blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. That's very clear. For God made man in his image. This verse underscores the sanctity of human life. Murder is not just a crime against another person, but an affront to God himself. The death penalty, therefore, serves as a just response to taking the life of an innocent person. In the Mosaic Law, God provided specific guidelines for justice, including the use of capital punishment for certain sins, such as murder. In Exodus 21:12, it states, "Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death." These laws were not arbitrary, but reflected God's holiness and his desire for order and justice in society. And you know what? It worked back then, and it can still work now. The New Testament, is going to the New Testament now, also affirms the role of government in wielding the sword of justice. For example, Romans 13:1-4 explains that governing authorities are instituted by God and are God's servant for your good. All right? While forgiveness is central to the Christian faith, forgiveness and justice are not mutually exclusive. God commands us to forgive personally, but also establish governments to execute justice impartially. In conclusion, the death penalty aligns with God's design for justice and reflects the seriousness, guys, the seriousness with which he views the taking of innocent life. Authorities are his instruments to maintain order and execute justice on earth. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning into this channel. I'm open to answering whatever replies you have. Please click, leave your remarks, and most importantly, please subscribe. God bless and be well.